I woke up one day and everyone, absolutely everyone, was, or is, gone. The internet is up, cable is running, electricity and water is still working, yet there's no one around and I can't get into contact with anyone. No one answers when I call on the phone, and although I can see the messages I've uploaded to social media, I see nothing from anyone else, just old posts and comments from the day before this happened that don't change when I refresh. It's like time has been frozen and all the animals, humans, and even bugs have been taken out of Earth. My name is, oh, who the hell cares? Who is gonna see this anyway? This is the only way to keep from going insane, uploading detailed accounts of whatever's happening to me, even though I have no idea if anyone can see it. If they can see it, then the responses are invisible to me, because I've tried sending SOS messages to family, friends, and even strangers. Nothing big or unexpected happened before that day a few months ago. I'm a regular girl, working part-time, in the city and sitting through college lectures when I'm not manning the counter of my local coffee shop. I live, or lived, with my parents and sister who's still in high school, since I couldn't afford to make it on my own yet. I had just come back from a late-night shift, working overtime from open to close since someone called out at the last minute, and I took an Uber back home. I used my spare key to get in the house, ate leftovers from dinner, took a hot shower, and climbed into bed. I had no dreams or weird visions or anything. I woke up to the sunlight coming through my window blinds. I looked at the time on my phone and realized I had overslept. When I went downstairs, I heard nothing but the TV playing an early morning show my mom loved to watch after dropping my sister off at school. Dad's absence could be explained by him going to work, but my mom's was weird. I looked around for her, but when I didn't find her, I didn't freak out. Not until I went outside. But I didn't do that until an hour had passed of me eating breakfast and thinking about the classes I'd missed the day before and that morning. I went out to catch a bus since it seemed Uber couldn't find a ride. And that's when I saw that my parents' cars were still in the driveway. Maybe my sister went to school on the bus for once, that was plausible. But what wasn't was my dad going to work without his car, and my mom running an errand without hers. I remember looking into the windows of their vehicles, seeing nothing amiss and trying their cell phones. It rang and ended with their voicemails. I don't think I realized how completely dead the neighborhood was until I walked to the nearest bus stop. Children's bikes were abandoned on the sidewalk, cars that would usually be gone during that time of day because the neighbors worked morning shifts like my dad were present in the garages. There was no sign of life anywhere, no birdsong, no butterflies or bees despite the weather conditions being perfect for them. Everything was so quiet, like an empty graveyard. I felt like something was deeply, deeply wrong, but I tried not to think about it as I waited for the bus. The bus did not come after an hour, and traffic was strangely at a standstill. I began walking, traveling further into the city, and that's when I started to grow more concerned by the second. The city was just as dead as the neighborhood. The bus I had been waiting on was parked at a stop on a busy street, with no driver and no passengers. The wind blew grocery bags like they were tumbleweeds across the road, and the buildings, while all lit up from the inside, contained no people. No employees, no customers. You get the gist. At that point, I would have been overjoyed just to see a squirrel climb up a tree. I reacted just as anyone would. I panicked, and I mean panicked hard. I had an utter meltdown in the middle of Broad Street, hyperventilating and curling into a ball, soaked in my own sweat. There was no one around to help me, to call an ambulance or even ask if I was all right. It was maddening, and it wasn't even midday yet. I walked all the way to my job, found the cafe open but vacant, and then walked to my college campus, which of course yielded the same results. I sat down in the lecture hall, frantically Googling anything on my phone that may relate to what was happening. All I could think was that the entire city had evacuated and I was somehow left behind or something like that. No news had been posted since yesterday on every website I checked. When I tried to refresh browser pages, the tabs would turn blank, and then an error message would appear. I went back home, which took at least 3 hours of walking, with sores developing on my feet, and got into my dad's car after finding his keys on the key tray in the hallway. A detail I hadn't noticed before. I was crying as I drove around the city, going around cars that were randomly stopped on the street. Numbers I kept calling and texting were my family and friends and the police, I didn't know what else to do. Eventually, I pulled over to the side of the road and sobbed and screamed in frustration, rocking in the driver's seat with my knees pulled up to my chest. I cried until I had no more tears left to shed, and my face was redder than a tomato with snot pouring out my nose like a faucet. This had to be a bad dream, I'd thought, or some kind of super elaborate hoax of which I was the sole victim. Day in and day out, I focused on adapting until I came across someone, and keeping myself sane by watching old YouTube videos and saved Instagram reels. I didn't dare go back home. The lack of the sound of my sister's rude jokes at my expense, my dad's laughter at some stupid sitcom, and my mother's cooking only served to give me a deep depression during which I never left my room, so I couldn't be reminded of how alone I was. Instead, I decided to try and make the most of the situation by traveling, since the world was still functioning just without the people who made it that way. That's something I thought about a lot. As the weeks passed, I was so scared that the lights would shut off permanently and the water would stop running. So scared, in fact, that it made me want to vomit and pass out. But that never happened. Even reruns of TV shows still broadcasted when I turned on any TV. It was really fucking weird. I mean, really, really weird. Who was keeping the electrical paid? Who was tending to the plumbing? Who was broadcasting television and keeping Wi-Fi servers up? The only catch was that I couldn't see anything new that was uploaded past the day I realized I was alone, meaning no recent news, no live shows, nothing. I tried not to think about this too hard because, to be honest, even though I was glad I could still flush toilets after I used them and turn on lights in dark rooms, the thought unsettled me. It made me feel like I was the center of the universe's cruelest practical joke, but I knew a prank of this magnitude was simply impossible. Unless my brain was undergoing some high-tech simulator while my body was in the real world, making me think this was reality, when it's actually a program designed as some mentally scarring experiment to see how a human would react when placed in this situation. At least if that was the case, there was hope of me waking up and returning to normal society. But again, nothing happened the day before all this. I didn't consent to any experiment or scientific testing. And why would these hypothetical government agents or scientists choose me of all people? After the first 2 months, I began to enjoy myself a bit. Not too much, but a reasonable amount, I'd like to think. I know it probably sounds crazy from your end, but if I kept making theories and freaking out about seemingly being the only person on the planet, or at least on the continent, then I would go insane. The hecticness of daily life is something we can all relate to, feeling like a cog in the machine and wondering if life is just one trial of survival after another. You might have thought to yourself, am I just going to work nonstop until I die? Who am I? Why am I doing this? When can I just enjoy life and take it easy without worrying about the future or bills? Well, when I realized that the upside to humanity, being erased, hopefully temporarily, was no rules and responsibilities, I looked at things with a fresher perspective. I would keep traveling until I found someone like me, of course, which was making me lose more hope each day as I'd gone through a few states by this time. But I would at least take a moment to enjoy the peaceful solitude on the way. I've taken the best naps of my life in fields full of wildflowers, went skinny dipping in hot springs, and even went into a restaurant, thawed out the food from the walk-in fridge, and used their kitchen to cook myself gourmet meals to the best of my abilities. So, many cars had keys in them, like they were all just sitting there for me to take a joyride in. I did donuts in parking lots. I went into Walmarts and stole video game consoles on which I played offline games on, and I slept in mansions in the best suites of any 5-star hotel. Every door was unlocked, making it unbelievably easy to go anywhere and do anything. One rich person's apartment I crashed in was in a high-rise, and I had an amazing time swimming in a pool on their balcony, which you could see the city miles down below through the glass floor. I always had to have noise, playing wherever I went. I kept one earphone in case I heard someone, and listened to music, and I always kept a TV on wherever I stayed. It replaced live human voices for me. It became white noise. I turned my tragedy into serenity, and though I still craved company, at least I could have a decent time until I found help, or woke up, or a scientist pulled the cords connecting my brain to the simulator. The third month came, and I was driving through the Midwestern region of the country in an RV I'd stolen so I could experience van life like those influencers, but without the risk and the money. I was going to the East Coast because I wanted to stay in a beach house. My cousin liked renting them in Virginia, Florida, and the two Carolinas, and I'd always wanted to experience them. Of course, autumn had come and winter was starting, or should have been at least. But it was still warm enough for a dip in the sea. Global warming, I guess. Anyways, night came and I stopped in some random city, choosing an upscale hotel to stay in. Highest floor, biggest room, and a hoard of food from the kitchen all to myself. I slept like a baby listening to a podcast, with the flat-screen TV playing some reality show. The lights always stayed on, and in this case, it was too bright. Table lamps, one on each side of the king-sized bed, and a standing lamp in the corner. I woke up in the middle of the night to complete darkness and utter silence. The TV was off, so were all the lights. The curtain was drawn over the glass wall, which showed a beautiful view of the city. When I was sure I had left them open to look at the dazzling lights of the skyscrapers. Instantly, I sat up and started, breathing heavily, knowing in my heart that my good time was over because the electricity was now gone. I figured I may as well just go back to sleep until daybreak, and then go and steal flashlights from the nearest store for the next night or something. But I wanted to open the curtains first. I guess I must have forgotten that I closed them. I pulled them aside, and my heart skipped a beat as I noticed something. The buildings in the city were still lit up. The energy still worked. I scrambled in the dark, pressing the power button on the bedside lamp. Nothing happened, so I felt for the cord, which had been unplugged. I plugged it back in, and the lamp turned on, glowing a soft yellow. Upon a quick investigation, I realized all the lamps had been unplugged and the remote to the TV was perched on the dresser across from my bed, even though I fell asleep with it on my nightstand. Then it hit me, all at once. It felt like the breath had been knocked from my lungs and I immediately started to tremble. Someone had been in this room while I was asleep. And while that should have made me excited to discover another human, it terrified me instead. Because whoever it was decided to fuck with me and leave me in complete darkness, rather than rejoice in the fact they had found another survivor. And if they would truly choose to scare me like this, even though I could very well be the only other human left on Earth, what type of person were they? Had they gone insane? Were they dangerous? Or was this simply proof that all of this was a hoax and they were now messing with me because I had started to make the best of my situation and that was too boring for the cameras? I honestly hoped to God the last part was the answer, because, while that would be the meanest hoax ever conceived, at least the nightmare would be over. But not so deep down, I knew the prank theory was utterly stupid and wrong. I mean, even if it was possible, no prank would go on this long. I just wanted to believe that over my terrifying reality. After I turned the lights and TV back on, I noticed the door was open, showing the dark hallway. Now I'm not the strongest or the bravest, but I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just go back to sleep. I gathered some stuff and used the light of my phone to navigate my way through the now dark hotel building, turning on the lights as I went. "Hello?" I called out. "Is anyone there?" When I got to the kitchen, I took a big carving knife with me just in case. The dead silence unnerved me to absolutely no end. I searched every room using keys from the office behind the lobby. It took a while looking inside closets and bathrooms, but eventually I was able to confidently say that whoever unplugged the lamps in my suite was no longer in the building. I didn't know how to feel about any of it. Half of me wanted to be happy to the point of tears that someone was in this with me, but the other half just knew this wasn't good news at all. I trusted my gut and decided to leave. I got in the RV and drove until daybreak, putting as much distance between me and that place as possible. I became exhausted and parked in the most crowded parking lot I could find, so I'd be hard to spot, then fell asleep. When I woke up in the middle of the afternoon, I started a regular day, trying to put the previous night past me. I toured this city I'd never been to before, and browsed a selection of name-brand clothes like Gucci and Prada that I would normally never be able to wear as a broke college student. I looked like a celebrity or some fashion model as I explored, looking for any sign of life. One of the things I missed the most was animals, like seeing someone walk, dog, or watching a cat nap in a windowsill. When I returned to the RV at sundown, I was met with a disturbing sight. The door to the RV was wide open, and almost everything was out of place. The covers on the bed were strewn on the floor, alongside my clothes and the food and items I'd stolen from stores either for survival or pleasure. The cupboards were open. The faucets were left running, including the tub. And worst of all, someone doodled a smiley face in the dust of one of the RV windows. 2 long vertical lines for the eyes and a curve under them for the mouth. This simple picture put so much fear in me, I felt like the world was collapsing. Once, again, someone had intruded in on my space and deliberately left a sign that they had been there. More than one person had to be fucking with me. Because how did the person from the hotel know where I was? How would they have found me so quickly? There are a million places I could be at. There was just absolutely no way they knew I'd be in this one city in this one parking lot. If there was more than one person, then why were they doing this? What did they want? Why don't they just come up to me and talk like a normal human being so we can figure this shit out together? I think that's when paranoia first hit me. Sometimes I don't think I'm paranoid and sometimes I do. I don't fucking know, okay? I feel like I'm going crazy. Well, that's when I first started having irrational thoughts like, who says it's a human to begin with? And if it is a human, who says they want to figure anything out? Maybe they know more than you do about why the world is like this and they know it's unfixable. So they're deciding to have their sick fun with you because, let's face it, who's around to stop them? The human brain can be so intelligent but also so masochistic. Mine was torturing me with all these thoughts until I felt like I couldn't breathe. I decided to pack a bag of the stuff I've hoarded since day one and abandon the RV. I can't count how many times I looked over my shoulder as I left to find another car. I felt watched. Once again, I found a vehicle parked with the doors unlocked, small and black, which is definitely more inconspicuous than a hulking RV. The keys were, as usual, inside, and once I got to driving away from that city, it felt like I had a breath of fresh air. However, I wasn't going to keep that car for long because if whoever did that was around to see me get into it, I didn't want them to be able to recognize the car in whatever place I went next. This time, I stayed on the road all day, only stopping to relieve myself at a convenience store and get gas. I tried to appreciate the sights I drove past, but I couldn't stop thinking about the stranger, which is what I had decided to call him, or her. It wasn't long then until I would reach the East Coast, but night came, and I had to sleep. I didn't want to give up comfort just yet, but I was also extremely nervous that I had been followed, although I saw no other cars driving on the road. Instead of sleeping in upscale hotels, I decided to change things up a bit, so I wouldn't be as predictable to the stranger. I considered sleeping in a crappy rundown motel, but I wanted to be absolutely sure they wouldn't know my next move. I parked miles away from my destination, and using Google Maps, which thankfully was still functioning normally, I walked there, using back alleys. The sliver of rationality remaining in my brain told me that there's no way they were in that small town without me seeing them following me in a vehicle. But I was taking no chances. I found a big grocery store, took the keys out of a random car in the parking lot that I was going to use the next morning, and decided to gather some covers from the domestic section and crash in one of the back offices of some manager. I locked the door, made a pad on the floor, and turned out the light. I ate a dinner of chips and candy rather than microwaving or cooking something that would release a smell which would indicate my location. It was hard getting to sleep, but I managed, trying to quietly listen to ambient soundtracks on YouTube with a Bluetooth earphone stuffed in my ear. Sleep snuck on me, really. I didn't even feel myself drifting off. I was bone-tired, but confident that I left no tracks and was going to be safe. I woke up to music, but nothing was playing on my phone. In fact, my phone had died, and the screen was black. No, the music was coming from the overhead speakers. An old tune from the 40s or 50s, one I faintly recognized but wasn't exactly too familiar with. We'll meet again. Don't know where. Don't know when. Someone was playing this over the intercom, and it blared throughout the entire store, at an almost deafening volume. I sat there on the floor swaddled in covers, shaking so hard I could barely grip my phone, as I wondered if it was even safe to leave that cramped little office. That's when I figured I should have tried to find a security room to crash in, as I'd seen cameras installed on the way in earlier. Maybe I could have spotted whoever this was on the footage, but now it was too late. I made double sure the door was locked and then plugged my phone up to the outlet in the corner so I could at least see the time. I tried to remain as quiet as possible in case the stranger was still there. When I powered my phone on, I realized it was 4 a.m., and I decided I would not try to leave until sunrise, which should have been in a couple of hours. I just had to sit and wait until then. After the song ended, I heard something else play over the intercom. Someone was simply breathing into the microphone, soft and subtle, but definitely there. The stranger was still there, and I had no idea how they could have possibly found me. I even checked my phone to make sure my location wasn't turned on anywhere, and went through all my stuff thoroughly to be sure there wasn't some kind of AirTag or tracker attached to my clothes or something. My search came up empty. I stayed in that back office for most of the day rather than leaving at sunrise like a sitting duck. I was too scared to leave. Hours passed of hearing nothing, no music and no breathing, but still, I didn't dare move. An inch from where I sat on the floor. I was hungry and thirsty. I felt like a child hiding under the covers from a monster in their closet. I felt foolish. Finally, I checked my phone and saw that it was evening time. I had to make a move. I looked for anything I could use as a weapon first, and all I found was a pen with a particularly sharp tip. I supposed I could stab someone in the neck with it. My backpack on my back, I crept out the door and realized that once again the lights had been turned out on me. Why? Was whoever was stalking me trying to make it easier to get the jump on me? I removed my shoes so that my footsteps were quiet, my socks padding on the linoleum floor. The only illumination I had was the street lamps outside streaming white, almost ghostly-looking light through the big front windows of the store, and the fridges, of course. When I got closer to the front of the store, where the registers were, I heard something fall off a shelf a few aisles away, not very far at all from my position. I immediately crouched down and listened intently, holding my backpack so the items contained within wouldn't make a rustling noise from me jostling it around. I heard no other sounds, but I was sure the stranger was still here. There was no way whatever that was had fallen on its own. Tears of fear slipped down my cheeks as I decided to abandon my backpack, deciding the contents of it were not worth the risk of it making a noise or slowing me down if I had a confrontation. I left it there on the floor as I changed directions, moving towards the back of the store to see if there was an emergency exit or back door I could exit from instead. I should have done that to begin with, but I don't tend to think too rationally when I'm scared at times. Indeed, all the way at the back there were a set of double doors I could just barely make out. They were the kind that had this big silver bar in the middle you had to push to open them, and those always made a noise. I braced myself and in one swift motion opened the doors and slipped outside. Oh my God, it was absolutely freezing cold outside. I did feel the back office get colder throughout the day, but I thought it was because of the AC or something. No, it's because it was snowing. Blankets of snow powdered the air and the ground was quickly being painted all white. The air felt like I had stepped into a freezer. It had just felt like summer yesterday, and at this time of day, the sun was supposed to start setting, but twilight had already fully descended upon the world. The sky was black, not a star could be seen, and the moon was a tiny sliver barely visible. It was barely autumn, let alone early winter. While it certainly gave me a shock, I did not waste a moment thinking about the drastic change in weather. Instead, I made my way around the front and ran to the car I'd prepared to leave in. As soon as I opened the door, all the lights in the store came on and it glowed yellow like a beacon in the dark. I froze and stared at the windows, my eyes scanning for any movement. I thought, for just a moment, that I saw a dark figure slip out of sight behind a shelf, but it was so subtle that it could have been a trick of my imagination. I got inside the car, shut and locked the door, ignited the engine, and drove out of that parking lot like a bat out of hell. Once again, I cried. All I could think was why? Why me? Why am I forced to endure this psychological torture? The only other person left here is stalking me, and I think they mean harm to me. Where is everyone? Where did you all go? Why did you leave me here by Myself with some lunatic, why won't any of you answer my messages? Oh, but don't think that's the worst part.